Welcome to the Transformation Church podcast, where we're leading people into a transforming relationship with Jesus. We hope this message inspires you, builds your faith, and gives you a fresh perspective on God and His Word so you can see transformation in your own life. Enjoy the message.
Happy Valentine's Day weekend. Yes, hope you had a great weekend. I don't know if you know this about Valentine's Day, but they said that we were expected to spend $27.5 billion over the weekend for Valentine's Day, and $2.5 billion of that was going towards sweets. Can I get an amen in the house for the sweets? I think it is. I think it's kind of funny, though, if you think about how Valentine's Day has evolved through the years. Right now, in this day and age that we live, guys are buying flowers and chocolate to prove their love for their significant other. And back when Valentine's Day started, guys were sacrificing goats and dogs to do the same thing. I don't know if you know that, but that's where it originated from. And I tell you, you think about that, nothing says I love you like a blood sacrifice, right? But speaking of sweets, I don't know what your New Year's resolution was, but my wife and I thought that we would go off sugar for a little bit, and we did pretty good for a little bit until we hit time to go to the grocery store, and so it kind of went like this. I went to the grocery store and was feeling kind of like a champ because we had gone multiple days, no sugar. And I don't know about you, but it's usually in that day 2, day 3 where it starts to get a little challenging. And so I walk into Publix, and you know how they try to get you with the front display of buy one, get one free. And so I blasted right past of those, good to go, no problem. When you take a right, that's the bakery section, right? And so I was able to plow right through the cookies and the fudge and the muffins and the donuts and the cakes in the freezer. And so I made it past all of that stuff. And then as I'm navigating the aisles, I hit aisle 3, which aisle 3 is the candy aisle. And so I keep going, and then I get to aisle 7, and I don't know about your grocery store, but aisle 7 in mine is the Oreos. And I started, it caught my attention a little bit, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so I kept going through the Oreo section, and the section that tripped me up was the veggie section. The frozen veggie section messed me up, and you may wonder, how in the world could that mess you up? And the reason why is because in my grocery store, the aisle right next to the frozen veggie section is the ice cream section. And they're not complete rows, it's like a half aisle, so you can you're walking down frozen vegetables and you can see over to the ice cream. And so I just kind of had this wrestle thought go through my mind, I can go down the aisle, I've gotten through all of this other stuff and I've been fine, and I'm just going to go down the ice cream aisle and I'm going to take a look at the sugar-free ice cream and see what kind of flavors are there. And man, next thing you know, I black out, total blackout, and I wake up and there's not just one tub of ice cream in my cart, there's 2, and I'm going to tell you, we destroyed that cookies and cream that night. And today we're talking a little bit about temptation, and temptation's a lot like that in our lives. I think it doesn't really force us to do something, it nudges us to do something. And we can have, in whatever area that is, we can have a lot of successes and wins. We can get through some of the aisles and feel like we've got confidence that we're good to go. And then it just takes kind of one moment a weak moment that causes us to stumble and to trip. And so we're gonna jump into a detour today around temptation, primarily around one that can be quite a bit awkward to talk about, sexual temptation. And so we'll get into that here in just a moment. But if today's your first time visiting with us, my name's Ryan, and the exit doors are right over there if this topic's freaking you out right now. But so great to have you today. So great to have those of you that are joining us online. We've been in this series that we've entitled Divine Detours, and we've been looking at the life of Joseph and how God has a way of allowing us to experience some detours or difficulties in our life in order to shape our character so that we can walk out His purpose in our life. And we've talked about pride and how to navigate pride. We've talked about hardship when we find ourselves going through some really difficult seasons in our life and how we navigate that with our heart. We talked about success and how do we navigate success in our life and do it in the right kind of way. And today we're going to talk about a detour that is uncomfortable. Like, I know I'm not going to get many amens today, but that's all right. We're going to talk about one that's a little uncomfortable but necessary. I want to talk about the temptation detour. And if you got if you got kids that are in the room, just so you know, today is PG-13. And so if you don't want to have to explain some weird stuff to little Johnny over lunch today, you might want to take them into TC Kids. Anybody appreciative of TC Kids? That's why we've got that amazing ministry, is to be able to minister to kids on their level. But if you got your phone, grab that. As James mentioned, tap the dot on the seat back in front of you. You can follow along with the notes today. And we're going to be in Genesis chapter 39 in just a moment. But in Genesis 37 is where this series kicked off for us. You may remember Joseph was given a dream by God, and the dream was one of the fact that Joseph was going to have great influence in his life. And Joseph did what many of us do when opportunity presents itself. Joseph made that opportunity about himself. He ends up elevating himself with pride, and that pride leads him down a road that he really didn't expect and didn't want to go down. And that road was his brothers who plotted to murder him. He ends up being sold as a slave and sold to Potiphar, who is essentially, he's kind of like the head of the secret service for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And this period of time that Joseph is a slave at Potiphar's house, a couple things are happening. One is that he is gaining influence, and he is also, God is shaping his character. And here's what I've learned about God's purpose for our life is that in every detour of our life that we navigate and we experience, as we navigate that detour in a healthy way, in a God-honoring way, it's like God's purpose for our life is like a coming off of Valentine's Day. It's like a cinnamon roll, right? And it's got the rings and the layers. And if you're like me, you don't just take a bite of a cinnamon roll. That's the absolute wrong way to eat a cinnamon roll. You gotta unwrap it, right? And you break off the pieces as you unwrap it. And that's how God's purpose is for our life, that as we navigate these character building detours, that he begins to unwrap more of his purpose. And so that's kind of happening in Joseph's life. Theologians say that it's somewhere between 5 and 8 years at this point of the story, between what's happening now and Joseph when he was 17, when he got a glimpse into his purpose. And so we're going to find today that Joseph's now stepping into another character building opportunity or detour, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Take a look at Genesis chapter 39, verse 6, here's what it says. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man. If your wife or girlfriend sitting next to you, just give him the little elbow and say, Bible's talking about me right here. Right here, the Bible's talking about me. Verse 7, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. Here's what she says, come and sleep with me. Again, if you're not putting the pieces together, she's not talking about a Sunday afternoon nap right here. And so that's what she demands. Verse 8 says, but Joseph refused. Look, he told her, my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. Verse 9 says, no one here has more authority. I think that's so fascinating because if you don't remember, Joseph is what? He's a slave, right? And God has given him influence in the place that he's currently at, which is not where he wants to be, but it's the place he's in. And so he's held back nothing from me except you because you are his wife. And then I want you to notice how Joseph defines sexual immorality, this temptation. He says, how could I do such a wicked thing that it would be a great sin against God? It says in verse 10 that she kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, and that's what temptation does, right? It doesn't force you into it, it nudges you into it. It's the temptation is that constant, like, aggravating knock on the door, that it's not like so insane that the first knock you got to get up and go answer it, but it's consistent enough to where at some point you get so annoyed at the knock that you're like, you just get up and you got to open the door. And that's what temptation tries to do in our lives. It's just that constant little knock day after day. But he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. In verse 11, it says that one day, however, no one else was around, and if you haven't figured it out yet, that's when temptation seems to be the most powerful in our life, is when we isolate ourselves in life. And isn't it interesting that the more that we struggle with things, the more that we isolate, not knowing that the harder it is for us to get through what we're going through when we do that. And so what does he do? He goes out of his way. No one else was around when he went into to do his work. And then verse 12, she came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, come on, sleep with me. Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, in her hand, and as he ran from the house. Now, like I said, speaking on this topic in church is a little bit awkward, but it's a topic that we have to lean into a little bit, and there's 4 reasons why we've got to lean into it. The first one is this, is that we can't fully understand Joseph's story if we don't talk about this season in Joseph's life. The second thing is the Bible is clear on this topic. The Bible doesn't shy away from the topic. How many know culture, that's the third reason, doesn't shy away from this topic? And at the end of the day, the fourth one is all of us deal with this topic on one level or another. Stats don't lie. 69% of Americans say that premarital sex is fine. 54% of Christians admit to watching porn periodically. And surprise, surprise, it's not just guys that deal with this temptation, because out of those percentages, 1/3 of them are women. Now, fun fact, I think this is interesting to point out, that when it comes to sex, men and women obviously rank their need for it a little differently. Men rank it as their number 1 or their number 2 need in life. Women rank it as number 13. And guess what number 12 is? Gardening. There you go. So, uncomfortable topic, but sometimes the most uncomfortable topics have to be the ones that we talk about the most. And so today I want to share 4 ways that Joseph was able to flee and to be able to pass this detour in his life as you and I are bombarded in a highly sexual culture that we live in today. So these are 4 ways that we can pass this detour in our life. The first one that we see that Joseph did is Joseph chose calling over his craving. He said, "Master, trust me with everything in his entire household, that he's held nothing back from me." He was so focused on what God was leading him to that he didn't allow the instant gratification to pull him away from it. Now, when you think about Joseph, like, he had the opportunity. He probably could have gotten away with that and nobody would have known, but he wasn't just thinking about that moment. He was thinking about his future. Now, what I find interesting about Joseph's situation is that in Genesis chapter 25, so in those days they lived for quite a long time, but in Genesis 25, you've got Joseph's dad, who's Jacob, and you got Joseph's uncle, who's Esau. And in the story with Jacob and Esau is the oldest of the kids of the brothers. So in those days, he would inherit a double portion of the inheritance. He had greater influence. The Bible even says that there is a blessing that God bestows on the oldest son in the family. And so here's Esau, again, Joseph's uncle, and he comes home, and Jacob, Joseph's dad, is making some soup. And Esau is so hungry that he ends up trading his birthright as the firstborn, trading his influence, his inheritance, for a bowl of soup. Now, I can't help but to wonder if that scenario had to be going through Joseph's mind in this season that he's experiencing these temptations from Potiphar's wife. I gotta imagine that he's thinking back in the stories that he heard as he was growing up, and how maybe he went fishing with his uncle one day, and his uncle's talking about how he's the one that should have had all the influence and the inheritance, but he gave it up for his brother's soup. Like, I can't help but to think that he probably had to be thinking of that. And could he have had that moment in his mind at this season? And it was that memory that helped him determine that I'm not going to fall for the same thing that my uncle fell for. So he chose his calling over his craving. The second thing that we see is that he called sin, sexual sin, what it really is. He said it's wicked, and it's a sin against God. And I think so many times in our lives and in our culture, we see a sin like this in our life, and we kind of tag these statements like, I messed up, or I made a mistake, or it's not that big of a deal. But I think what Joseph would have us understand is that sexual sin in our life, that it isn't just a mistake, but it's a trap. It's a trap to try to get us to trade our future and God's purpose for our life for instant gratification. And I think Joseph had this moment where he wasn't just thinking about how this choice would affect his life, but he was also thinking about how it would affect God's heart. And friend, when you and I began to take that kind of perspective, to have that kind of perspective on sexual sin and immorality in our life, what it does for us is it helps us to get a different perspective. It helps us to quit looking at these things as an opportunity in our life and to see them more as an obstacle. as a trap that the enemy puts in our path to try to keep us from experiencing all that God has for us. So he chose calling over craving. He labeled the sexual sin for what it really is. The third thing that he did, this is a big one, is he set healthy boundaries. When you look at what's said in the text, that he kept out of her way as much as possible. In other words, when Joseph realized, I've got a problem with this woman, he set some boundaries. And Jesus addressed the need, the importance of boundaries in a really kind of intense way in the Gospel of Matthew. Here's what Jesus said, that if your eye, even your good eye, is causing you to lust, you should gouge it out. Like, I know he's being kind of over the top here to try to get his point across, but he's like, gouge it out and throw it away. That it's better for you to lose one part of your body. In other words, in our kind of context today, it's better for you to not be on social media. It's better for you to get the TV out of your house. It's better for you to get rid of the PlayStation or whatever. It's better for you to not go to the lunchroom where all the other employees or students go, because you know that every time you go at this point of the day, that person is there that you keep catching eyes with. Or maybe it's the gym, and a certain time that you go to the gym in the week is a time that somebody else is there. And what Jesus is saying is it's better for you to create some boundaries in your life than it is for you to lose your life. He says one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Listen, at the end of the day, boundaries are a way to protect our purpose without losing and gouging out our eyes. And if you have any interest in kind of growing in this area, if you recognize this as an area that you need to kind of shore up in your life, in the notes at the tap dot, I've included a link to a series that we did called Boundaries, and I would encourage you to take some time to watch through that. But here's what I've learned in my life. I don't know if you've learned it in yours. I've learned it in mine, that boundaries, they're not about restricting our freedom. They're about protecting our future. That at the end of the day, I'd rather not have some things that I could have, so that I could walk in the purpose that God has for me, than to have some things that might be like okay, or I might have access to, but it's going to take me down a path away from God's purpose. And then the fourth thing that I want to show you today is this, is that he didn't just resist. He didn't just use some self-control or some discipline, but my man ran. He ran in such a way that he left his cloak in her hands. Now, if you're not putting the two and two together, essentially Joseph is running away in his tighty-whities, and for any of us that would probably be quite humiliating. But in that culture in ancient Egypt, it wouldn't be just embarrassing or humiliating. It was an actual sign of total disgrace. But yet Joseph didn't care. He didn't care, and here's the reason why he didn't care. He would rather be humiliated and holy than clothed and compromised. You see, that's the reason why the Bible says that pride comes before the fall. It's because in our life we can't be free if we can't be vulnerable. And pride in our life keeps us from being vulnerable. pride pulls us into the shadows where we're dealing with our sin in isolation. See, Joseph understood this. He wasn't worried about his reputation or his dignity or what people might say. He just knew that he had to run. And he was willing to experience total disgrace in order to protect his purpose. And friend, if you want freedom in this area of your life, you've got to be willing to do the same thing. But here's the thing that I don't want you to miss today. It's the reason why so often we repeatedly fail in this area, and it's for this reason. Saying no to the wrong thing won't last until you say yes to the right thing. It's not good enough just to try to say no to the temptation. It's got to be partnered with saying yes to the right thing. And we see that in this verse in Timothy, that it says, run as fast as you can. And notice this, you're running from all the ambitions and the lust of your youth, the things that the enemy is using to try to pull you off course in life. But we're not supposed to just run from it, but we're also, in return, we're supposed to chase after. What are we supposed to chase after? What is pure. And so many times in life, that's the part that we live out. See, Timothy helps us see here that the things that we've got to chase after is the things that build us up in our faith. We talked about that a few weeks ago. It's the hearing part. It's those three components of not just listening, but understanding, and then living that out in our life. That's how we build our faith. But then he talks about love, and we got to go after what deepens our love. And the Bible's clear about that love, a deeper love, comes from serving others and living generously. And Timothy in this scripture says that should be our holy pursuit in life. Friend, this morning, if you're tired of dealing with this temptation detour over and over again in your life, friend, you don't have to keep circling it. Maybe today you feel trapped in the shame of the choices that you've made, or weighed down from the regrets, or you're beginning to recognize the broken lives that lie in the wake of your choices. Today, Jesus is waiting. His arms are open wide. He's ready to lift the burden, to remove the shame, to put your broken life back together again. And how does he do it? It happens by us choosing to run from sin and run towards him.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's message, be sure to share it with your friends and tag us at TransformTLH. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing your face in the place someday. Have a great week.